What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video, and today it's the Game Week 9 preview. So as always, going to go through your topics, questions that you've put to me on YouTube and on Twitter going into Game Week 9. And it's a bit of a difficult one, right? Always is after an international break, because people are making big decisions based off little or no info in some cases. We're obviously waiting for international games to finish. Press conferences are key as well. But there's still some big talking points to go through this week. People are asking about free hits and wildcards and taking hits, fielding weaker teams, Kane, Vardy, Werner, Salah, lots to go through. So before I do, please do hit that like button if you've been enjoying this series and you want to see more. And of course, hit subscribe if you haven't already. It's completely free, so please consider doing that. Otherwise, I'll jump into the first topic. So we'll start off with Harry Kane, probably one of the bigger talking points this week. A lot of people looking to maybe sell. Like I've talked about it quite a bit. Obviously, when it comes to actually pushing the button and transferring him out, whether it's this week or next week, which I've seen some people considering as well, it's much difficult to actually push the button than it is to talk about doing it. But also, some people don't want to do it, right? They're asking about what are the advantages to keeping Kane, right? Is there a reason to hold him as well? And there are plenty of good reasons why you might want to hold on to him, right? So if you look at kind of underlying numbers, not just the FPL points, but kind of shots in the box, expected goals and all that kind of thing, right? So non-penalty expected goals, only Calvert-Lewin and Bamford are higher than Harry Kane. So that's pretty impressive. Obviously, Bamford and Calvert-Lewin in their own right are really good options and they're cheaper. But Harry Kane is right up there, right? He's beaten the likes of Salah, Mane, Sterling, De Bruyne, etc. He has played more minutes than a lot of them, but still decent. His expected goal involvement is basically the same as Salah, right? There's 0.01 difference. I think it's something like 7.76 expected goal involvement for Salah and 7.75 for Kane. Now, Kane's is coming from goals, expected goals, rather than expected assists, which is nice. But ultimately, both players are doing really well and they've both got penalties. And I keep asking myself, if Salah had this run of fixtures and had the same stats that Kane's got right now, would I look to get rid of him? And I do think I'd be a little bit more wary. And in some ways, that's fair, right? Because Salah's done it the last 4 seasons, got plenty of points, FPL points, of course, and he's a midfielder, so he's going to get more points for goals, clean sheets, etc. So I do think it's harder to let go of Salah than it is like someone like Kane. But Kane is also a lot cheaper as well. So the numbers stack up. If you look at the fixtures, I think you can look at them and say they're difficult, or you can look at them and make a case to say some of them aren't so bad, right? But I think sometimes when you're saying that they're not so bad, that's basically like saying they're not great, right? It's the same thing. They're not bad, they're also not great. So Man City at home and Chelsea away, they're difficult fixtures, right? And people keep saying to me they could get something in there. There's no reason why they won't get something. They could get it on the counter. Kane could get a penalty, right? Of course, any player could get points in any game. And don't get me wrong, Kane is better than the average player. But I think when you're saying they could, that's obvious. But you're trying to play odds in FPL. The odds are against Man City, Chelsea, his volume of FPL points goes down on average versus the other fixtures he's had so far this season, which have mostly been easier fixtures, right? The Man United game, a bit different. The red card, they didn't do very well against Everton on the opening day. But since then, they've been fine. But the fixtures have been easier. They've not been Man City. They've not been Chelsea. So they're difficult fixtures. Arsenal at home is probably okay. I always hear about he likes playing against Arsenal, etc., etc. I don't really pay too much attention to that. But Arsenal at home is probably not the worst fixture. But Arsenal are defending pretty well this season, apart from against Aston Villa. Palace away is okay. Then Liverpool away is difficult, right? And I don't care how many injuries. Well, at some point you would care. But right now I expect Robertson to be fit. Most of their midfield is fit. They're going to be able to bring in Milner, maybe Fabinho when he's back, Matip. Liverpool are not suddenly this awful team that we should be targeting, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more when it comes to Jamie Vardy. So I think that's a difficult fixture. And then Leicester and Wolves, okay, they're not at the same level as Man City, Chelsea, but they're still difficult, right? And in that next, 7 fixture run, Man City, Chelsea, Arsenal, Liverpool, Leicester, Wolves, that is tough. You're never going to captain them over those fixtures. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, right? Because of his price, a lot of people would have got on about 10.6, 10.7, 10.8 million. And when you look at a player like Bruno Fernandes, some people are holding him. They're not looking to captain. Maybe they will this week, but in general, they're not looking to captain him. And people are still fine to hold on to him. So maybe the captaincy argument has some weight, but maybe not as much weight as it usually would, like if he was still 12 or even 13 million or something crazy like that. So you're definitely not going to captain him, I don't think, over those 7 fixtures. If you are, fair enough, but at no point over those fixtures is he the best captain option, in my opinion. Another reason to hold him is maybe structure. Maybe if you could just go down to Vardy or Jesus or just hold him because you want that big price forward slot. Obviously, if you've got a plan like me to put that money into midfield, if you want to swap that back again, that's going to cost you 2 free transfers to do it. So if I'm going Kane and like a cheap midfielder to Watkins and Sterling, if I want to change that back to get Kane back, it's another 2 transfers. It's 4 transfers out and back in. So that's something to consider. So the advantages are his underlying numbers are good, and you keep that, you know, that kind of premium striker, and you don't have to use all those transfers to get him back in. But for me, I don't think he's like essential or anything or captainable until game week 16. So it's a long time till you have to get him back in. A lot could have changed at that point. So for me, I'm still looking at staying strong and getting rid of him, but I can see why people would hold, right? The numbers are as good as Salah, and when Salah's got those numbers, you don't get rid of him. So quite a few questions came in about Jamie Vardy. Not too many about Werner, though, which I think is interesting, right? So I'm going to talk about the 2 of them because they're both similar priced forwards. They're not exactly the same price. Werner's actually nearly $1 million less. But in terms of having that slot taken up by a Kane, a Vardy and a Werner, I think they kind of all intertwine together in terms of their prices. And a few people asked me if Vardy was essential. Like, no one's essential, right? Let's get it out there. Nobody is essential. There are some players who I think are very, very, very worth having, like Chilwell, for example, Salah when he's fit. But no one's essential. And I don't think Vardy is by any stretch, right? And we were just talking about, or I was just talking about it just a minute ago about Liverpool. People now saying, well, get Jamie Vardy in. I've seen people talking now about captaining Jamie Vardy because of Liverpool's defence, right? Yes, Van Dijk is a big miss. Yes, Trent, creatively especially, is a big miss. But if Milner comes in, are they any worse defensively with Milner there than Trent Alexander-Arnold? Maybe not. They might even have to play more defensive because of the players they've got. I think Robertson's going to be fit. If Matip is fit, then there's only one other centre-back. That's quite a lot of experience, right? Robertson, Milner, Matip in your back line with Alisson in goal. You've got Jordan Henderson. I know like he's been out of the England side from... he played 45 minutes, I think, then got brought off at half-time. But he's probably going to be fine. Salah might miss out, but then they've got Jota, Firmino and Mane front line. That team is still strong, right? Liverpool are not suddenly a fixture that you want to target, in my opinion. Yes, the fixtures after that are quite good. Fulham, especially at home in Game Week 10, is decent. Sheffield United away, then Brighton at home. Then the fixtures are okay. They're nothing special. So I don't think he's essential. 10.1 is still a lot of money. I think you could even make an argument just to keep Kane and not go for Vardy. But that Fulham fixture in particular is really good, and you could captain him in that. So yeah, I don't think that he's essential. And I think the thing with Kane, right, he's got tougher fixtures, but his numbers are good. He's getting plenty of shots in the box. He's creating lots of chances. His expected goals are decent as well. So are Vardy's, but so much of that has come from penalties. And I've talked about this a lot recently. You can't knock a player for putting in penalties, right? One of the reasons I like Kane is because he's got penalties. Same for Salah, same for Bruno Fernandes, right? Having penalties is a good thing, and it is worth a lot in FPL because you get them and you can top up your points very easily. Leicester have had 8 already. Vardy's taken the majority of them. And you just think, are they going to keep getting them? Once they dry up, how many chances will Vardy get and how many points will he keep scoring? So the fixtures are there, but I think if you're talking about essential, absolutely not. Kane to Vardy for a short-term move could be good. I do think that Werner is an interesting proposition, especially now he has penalties, right? Again, he now comes onto the radar. Imagine if he'd had them since the start, because I think Jorginho has taken 2 or 3 penalties that Werner could have been taking. I know he got an assist for one of them, but you get a goal, it boosts your bonus points as well as a forward, and suddenly he's got more and more points, and we're probably thinking of holding him and not actually selling him like most of us have at this point. So I think if you're going for a short-term move where you want to get Kane out and bring Vardy in, then absolutely fine. I think if you want a longer-term hold where you're maybe not looking to get Kane back in, maybe you've got Kane and Vardy or Kane and Werner, I actually think Werner might be a longer-term hold. He's playing in a side that are creating more chances. They've already scored the most goals in the league so far this season, Chelsea. I think that's going to continue. I think Ziyech is such a big plus to their attack. The only thing I will say is he sometimes gets played left, he sometimes gets played centre, and I think he can play both those positions. But maybe it's not that so easy to be fluid every single week when you're having to not constantly move, but often move, I would say. But the penalties are going to be backed up. They are going to create a lot of chances for him and for other teammates. I guess the only downside to a Werner versus a Vardy, if Leicester score, most of your money would be on the fact that Vardy has been involved. Either he's won the penalty, he's taken the penalty, he's scored the goal, or he's maybe assisted. If Chelsea score, it's like, well, is it Werner? Is it Ziyech? Is it Pulisic when he's fit? Is it Havertz? There's lots of players that can score on that Chelsea team, but they're probably going to score more goals, especially from open play as well. So don't ignore Werner, although I appreciate the fixtures are not anywhere near as good as Vardy's, but they're not as good as Vardy's. But don't completely rule him out as well. But yeah, Vardy, decent option for the maybe short term, but I don't think you want to start suddenly targeting him, especially for the Liverpool game. So I won't lie, I was a little bit surprised about the amount of people that are both considering free hit and that asked me specifically about whether they should free hit. So yeah, I was a little bit surprised. I think the issue is for anyone that is maybe a little bit newer to FPL. Obviously, when you use your wildcard, you keep that team going forward. When you use your free hit, it's like a wildcard, right? You can change your team completely, but you get your previous team back. So if I use my free hit in game week 9, now I'll have a different team. But in game week 10, I'll get my game week 8 team back, right? And price rises and falls still continue for that team you had. So you've got to be careful about when you use it because you can only use it once. And I think it's a little bit crazy to suddenly be thinking about using it this week because of a couple of flags, right? I'm not going to go through every single player, but if I had to bet money, I would say that nearly every single player that is flagged right now, when I say every player, I mean big names that people are worried about, right? Mitchell, red flagged, who cares, right? Robertson, probably going to be fit. Sterling, probably going to be fit. Chilwell, probably going to be fit. Rashford, probably going to be fit. Salah, I think he'll be the big issue. I think he's the one that's going to miss out. But those 4 names I've just reeled off straight away, they're all probably going to be fine. There might be some reduced minutes, maybe, but that's not something you're going to be able to count on, I don't think, unless a manager comes out and says it in a press conference. And that's super unlikely. So I think most of those flagged players will be fine. They'll be available to play, in which case, why are you using the free hit? For me, the doubles and blank game weeks, right, we do put a lot of emphasis on them, but they are big, and they can more easily be managed by holding things like your free hit and your wild card as long as possible. Free hit especially, right? So what usually happens, and we don't know 100% it's going to happen like this, I don't think so far this season because it's not been scheduled, but what will usually happen is a double game will get announced. That's when a team will play more than once in a game week, so they'll have 2 fixtures. There's always talk about maybe 3 happening at some point, but it's always 2. And so you build your team to get those players in. Because if Man City are playing against, Villa and Brighton at home in one game, there's some big points potential there if players play twice. So you start building your team for that. But sometimes because teams are playing twice, they also blank in another game week. So that means there's a reduced set of fixtures, right? So Man City might, like in the first game week, right? Man City, Man United didn't play in the first game week. And you can't use those players. So usually in that scenario, using your free hit in the blank game week helps you because you can just build your team for the double game week. In that week where some of those players aren't playing, you use your free hit, you get in a team of players that are playing, and then the next week you go back to your double game week team that you've been building to. So for me, I wouldn't use it. I think this is all coming up because of flags, and most of those flags are going to go. I might be wrong, but we'll have to wait until press conferences. I certainly would not be using that free hit. I think it's so much more valuable later on in the season. There might be some of you with teams out there that need the free hit, but the big consideration is you're going to get that team back. So if you've got players out for the long term, they're just going to be back into your team for game week 10. So for those thinking about free hit, I would really strongly consider waiting until around the blanks and double game weeks. So do you remember at the start when I said sometimes people are making big decisions based off little or no info? Well, Salah is one of them, right? We still don't 100% know what is going on. Liverpool still haven't said how long he's going to be out for. From what I gather, there's going to be another test on Wednesday or Thursday, and if that's negative, he can then fly back. But it sounds like he's then going to have to self-isolate. So basically, for my team, I am planning that Salah is out. Right? That is what I'm planning for, that he's going to be out for game week 9. So I think we can't take it as a given, like 100%, but it sounds like that's going to happen. Whether or not he'll be out for game week 10, we don't know yet. But I'm hopeful he'll be back for that. So some people ask me what the benefits of selling Salah. For me, if he's just out for 1 week, the benefits are really small, right? If you say that every transfer is worth 4 points, right? It doesn't cost, not every transfer costs you 4 points, but it's worth 4 points because if you need to use an extra one, it's going to cost you those 4 points. So some people look at free transfers and, well, I've got a free transfer to get rid of him and I've got a free transfer to get him back. If you say that's worth 4 points, it's not so easy then to transfer him out. So let's say you decide to get rid of him for game week 9 and let's say your bench player, right? I've got Basuma, for example. Let's say he only gets 2 points. That's 2 points. The first transfer to get rid of Salah is 4. That's 6 points. To get him back, that's another 4 points. That's 10 points. So the player you bring in has got to score 10 points or more usually to make that worthwhile. Now, if the player you're bringing in is a captaincy option and you're sure they're the best captaincy option in game week 9, maybe it'll be worth it, right? Maybe you bring in Bruno Fernandes for Salah and maybe he gets 15 points, that goes up to 30 with the captain, then yeah, it probably was worth transferring Salah out and back in. You're not going to lose much money. It's just 0.1 million, which is not a huge thing, for the course of the season, I would say. But you're hoping that the player you bring in absolutely nails it and that you get the captain right. If you're not captaining them, it gets even more difficult because, okay, Bruno could come in, just using him as an example, and get 15 points. That's only 5-point buffer. What if he just gets a goal and no bonus points and Man United don't keep a clean sheet? 7 points, probably not been worthwhile. So I would strongly consider using your bench. And we're going to talk about hits and stuff like that in a little bit. I would strongly consider using your bench instead of selling Salah if it's just for 1 week. Of course, if you want to get rid of him and then not bring him back because you've got other plans, that was always your plan, then fair enough, that's a little bit different. But in Game Week 10, they play Brighton. In Game Week 12, they play Fulham. Their fixtures you're going to want Salah for and potentially even going to want to captain him for. So for me, unless he's out for more than 1 week, in most cases, you probably just keep him, right? Those transfers are more precious than sometimes people make out. And transferring a player out just to get them straight back is very difficult to work out. Like, look at anything, right? People put out content where they pick a free hit team basically for that week, right? Could be scout picks on Fantasy Football Scout. There's a scout squad, I think, on official FPL. It's difficult to nail that every single week because picking 15 players that are absolutely going to smash it that week is not as easy as we think. And it's the same for bringing in one player for 1 week and hoping it works out. So for me, I certainly wouldn't do it for a hit. For free, look, maybe you can consider it, but not for me. If he's out for 2 weeks, then yeah, I want to make the most of that 12-odd million sat on my bench. But for 1 week, he's staying. So if a lot of people are looking to get rid of Kane and Son, I'd say it's also that time of the season when people are maybe looking to bring in Kevin De Bruyne or Sterling if they haven't already. If not this week, then probably next week instead. Now, it's a little bit difficult to compare them because of the number of injuries they've had, not just to like Kevin De Bruyne who's missed games, but also to Aguero and Jesus. They've not really had their full strength 11 for most of this season, and so it's maybe not completely fair to compare them. But guess what? We're going to compare them anyway, right? So I think it's quite interesting because De Bruyne is doing really well. And obviously he's a good player, but he's doing really well in terms of goal threat as well, which I wouldn't necessarily expect. So Sterling's played 622 minutes and De Bruyne has played 472. So that's what, 150 minutes less for De Bruyne, which is a game and a half, just over a game and a half. And Sterling's created 8 chances. De Bruyne has created 20. Now, we always know he's the creative force in that team, but that's more than double. The shots in the box is where it gets really interesting for me. Sterling's had 11, which is okay. It's not brilliant, to be honest. I think Vardy's on like 15, Kane's on like 20-odd. So 11's not great, but it's not bad either. But De Bruyne's had 7, so he's not that far behind in terms of shots in the box. So I'm surprised at how kind of close that is. Obviously, if you like to go different, then Sterling is much lower owned. Personally, I just wouldn't look at ownership. I'd just go for the best player at this stage of the season. De Bruyne is on penalties. We think he did miss the last one. We still don't 100% know if when Aguero is back that Aguero won't get the penalties back. But given how good De Bruyne has been, apart from that awful miss, by the way, it was really bad against Liverpool, he probably is going to keep them. So for me, given that he's creating so many more chances, he's having quite a few shots in the box for him, especially versus Sterling at the moment, and he's on penalties. I do think he's probably the better option. In terms of like getting rested and rotated, so I've got a quote from Pep on Sterling. He said, "There will be a moment when he takes a rest, but he's important for us. That is why we cannot leave him out. With his physicality, he plays all the minutes, right?" So he's basically saying he's so fit he can keep playing. And rotation's always a worry for Man City. But I looked at last Christmas. Now, there are different circumstances, right? Last Christmas, we weren't worried about COVID and stuff like that. Obviously, there's been a shorter pre-season break. There's been all the Champions League stuff in quick succession as well. So it is a different scenario. But in terms of the amount of games over Christmas, most of them are quite spread out, to be honest. There's the ones over like Boxing Day and New Year's that are close. But otherwise, it's pretty spread out, right? So I looked at last year. De Bruyne played when I say played, he started every single game from game week 9 to 27. So all the games over Christmas, no issue. Sterling played all the games over December. He only played 1 minute on January 1st though, and then was benched for January 12th. I'm not really sure about that because there was quite a bit of time in between. But ultimately, neither of these two players got rested that much. And the fixtures are so good over Christmas as well. So I'm pretty tempted just to maybe go for both. If I was picking one, it definitely would be De Bruyne as it stands. But we know what Sterling can do. Look at the end of last season. When he turns it on, he really does turn it on. And without penalties, he's going to score more goals from open play than De Bruyne on average, I would say. One thing to note as well is the EFL have just put in 5 subs. So they're going to allow 5 subs now instead of 3. For me, it's inevitable that's going to happen in the Premier League soon. I actually think that makes Man City players even better because they can play De Bruyne and Sterling more often from the start and then give them a break if they need to. And if they don't play, there's way more chance that they're going to come on as well. So for me, 5 subs actually probably makes them better options than before. But ultimately, they don't get rotated that much. The fixtures are really good. I'd pick De Bruyne, but I'd be tempted to go for both. Or if you want to go a little bit different, then Sterling. So we'll just finish on taking hits versus fielding a weaker team. Well, I don't want to spend too much on this because, again, most of these flags are going to go and your team is going to be fine. But people are saying, like, when is a free hit right? Am I allowed to take a free hit? Like, you're allowed to do what you want for your team. For me, the thing with hits never, ever changes, right? Whether you're taking it in the first week, the last week, in a week after the international break. It very rarely changes, right? Do you actually need the hit? What is your bench like, right? A lot of people, and I do this for sure, and it's something I really want to kind of get better at, is we just feel like the bench is going to get no points, so we just always want to take the hit. But again, it's a bit like the situation that I talked about earlier. Let's say your bench player gets 2 points, right, minimum. They're not. Let's say you don't think they're going to score, they're not going to assist, they're not going to clean sheet. If you take a hit, that's 6 points. So whoever you bring in has to hit at least 7 points to have been worthwhile. Now, that's fine if the player you want to bring in, you want to keep long term. If you don't, then what's the point? You might as well just keep the player that you took out if it's just a 1 week injury or whatever it might be, knock or something like that. Obviously, for longer term, it's a different situation, and sometimes your team will get into so much trouble. You might need to take a hit or two. Like if you've got no playing bench, for example, that kind of changes things. But let me give you like an example, like Chilwell. Now he's probably going to be fine because he's in the England squad for the next game. But if I got rid of him for a hit, I'd definitely want him back straight away. And I'd have to pay more money because he's gone up in price since he's been in my team. So why would I not just play a bench player instead? Like, and I mean, that's maybe an extreme example because he's probably going to be okay. But, and I've said this before, right, when I talked about my team selection. You cannot have the perfect team every week. I know that's so easy to say, and some people think that's rubbish, right? You should be striving to get the perfect team. But FPL is about managing your team, right? Managing it. Sometimes that means you'll have a game week where you're probably treading water a little bit. You've not got the most ideal team, but those players that are maybe missing out, you 100% want for the next few weeks. Like Salah is going to be my captain probably, 4 or 5 times over the next 10 game weeks. No way I'd want to get rid of him. No way I want to take a hit to do that. Same with Chilwell. Now, if they were both injured and Rashford was injured as well, then it's a little bit different. Maybe I start taking some hits to get them in and out, because at that point I am struggling to use bench players because I've only got 2. Right? I've got Basuma and Reguilon, and I'm not expecting Reguilon to get too many points anyway. But I do think too often we don't want to use the bench player because, you know, it's not a Mane or it's not a James Maddison or a Harvey Barnes or whatever. Of course it's not. They're cheap and they're probably not going to get too many points. But this is when you need to call upon them. So everyone's in the same boat. If you're thinking about a big player who's flagged and you're worried about them, there's lots of other people that will all own that player as well. And FPL is about managing it. You could attack it. You could just take the hits, hope to get massive points, which is, of course, what we want to do every week in FPL. But it's not always possible. You don't always get it right. And sometimes the odds just say, take it steady, keep that player in, play a bench player. Okay, you might not absolutely smash it and get 100, 200, 300k green arrow, but you've got a really good squad for the next few weeks to then get a 300k green arrow. So there's no blanket advice for taking a hit. It all depends on the individual situation, but sometimes you're going to have to field a weaker team, and it's not the end of the world. That's it for this one. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully it was useful as well. Like I said, there's still some unknowns, but overall strategy and talk about players we can still go through. So let me know in the comments below if you've got any follow-up questions. What are you doing with Salah? What are you doing with Kane? Are you getting De Bruyne or Sterling? Let me know in the comments below, and also whether you're taking a hit and stuff like that. I know some of the stuff we went over was similar, right? Taking hits is probably similar to using the wildcard or using the free hit. The flags are going to go. Most of them are going to go. don't stress about it too much. If anything, you probably chill out and just wait till the press conferences and then make your decisions. So there we go. Game week preview done. Please do give it a like if you've enjoyed it and hit that subscribe button if you're new around here as well. Big shout out to everyone that's signed up to Patreon, patreon.com/Let's Talk FPL. If you want to sign up for that or check out what it's all about, there's a link in the description below. Anyone that signs up goes up on the Patreon Legends wall. There's early team reveals, Slack access, WhatsApp access. You've heard me say it all before. If you haven't already checked it out, why not? Link in the description below. I'll leave this video there. I'm probably going to do a stream tomorrow evening, and then Friday will be captaincy video and Saturday deadline stream. So there'll be no probably pre-recorded video tomorrow, but that can change. I usually say that, and then I just do one anyway. So we'll see what happens. But thanks for watching this one. Hit that like button, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell as well, and I'll catch you soon for another video.